This is Jarrod Horak, and this is my latest Belmont Stakes video. It's Wednesday, June 5th, and the Belmont Stakes is going to be held at Saratoga Racecourse on Saturday, June 8th, and it will be contested at 1.25 miles this year. Now, I had some commenters voicing their displeasure with the shorter distance this year, but I recommend that a lot of people go over and read the Daily Racing Form article where they talk about the history of the Belmont Stakes that they posted earlier today. There's been plenty of changes over the years in the Belmont Stakes. They've run the race at different venues. They've run the race at different distances from 1.125 miles to 1.5 miles, and it's been run at 1.25 miles 6 times before. So there's been a lot of changes over the years, and the Belmont's been around since 1867. So it's not that big of a deal that the Belmont Stakes is at 1.25 miles this year, and it'll be at Saratoga again next year. And then when renovations are done at Belmont Park in 2026, the race is supposed to resume at that venue and be back at 1.5 miles. So let's check the weather forecast, because in this video I'm going to discuss the possibility of a wet track for the Belmont Stakes this year. Now they're doing the 4-day Belmont Stakes Festival at Saratoga, so they're having live racing from June 6th through 9th. And the best chance of rain this week is June 6th. There's a 100% chance of rain on June 6th, and throughout the day there's a chance of rain. So definitely it's looking like there's a good chance that there's going to be a wet track on Thursday this week. And then Friday, the rain definitely tapers off. Scattered showers, 40% chance, and that's not a 40% chance all day. There's a lower chance for a lot of the day, and then it kind of spikes a little bit around 6 p.m. And then Saturday, for Belmont Stakes Day, 40% chance of precipitation in Saratoga Springs that day. A lot of the day, there's like a 20% chance, and then later in the day, it drops after that. And then Sunday, the final day of the Belmont Stakes Festival, as of this video, 60% chance of scattered showers, mainly in the morning and then tapering off in the afternoon. So we'll have to see how much moisture is going to be in the track, obviously for Thursday, and then Friday. We could be seeing a drying out track. We'll see to see exactly how much rain that they get, how fast that track dries out, and what exactly that it's going to look like. Now, if you're interested in purchasing my annual Belmont Stakes Day full card, you can get that full card at the runawayhorse.com on my sales page. I finished my Thursday full card because I'm doing full cards for all 4 days of the Belmont Stakes Festival, June 6th through 9th. The Thursday, June 6th full card's done. I'm working on the other 3 days now. I'm going to have all of those full cards done later this week. And then also, when they have the morning scratches for each day, I'm going to update all of my tickets, because I'm sure we could be seeing some surface switches and some late scratches, and I'm going to be making changes to my suggested tickets all 4 days of the Belmont Stakes Day Festival. If you're interested in purchasing my full cards for Belmont Stakes Week, go over to the runawayhorse.com on my sales page, and you can get $3 off my Belmont Stakes Day full card. In the description in this video, I have a promo code that you can use at the runawayhorse.com on my sales page to get $3 off my Belmont Stakes Day full card. I've been doing these full cards since the late 1990s. Had a lot of success in the Belmont Stakes in the last decade, 8 winning tickets in the last 10 years for the Belmont Stakes. So having a lot of success in the Belmont, and hopefully I can continue that this year at Saratoga. And now we'll talk about the wet track horses. If it is wet, which horses may like it. It really is going to depend on what kind of wet track we get. If the track is wet, is it going to be a speed favoring wet track like it was in the Preakness Stakes? Sometimes on wet tracks, you have a drying out wet track and closers will do well. Sometimes the inside lanes are best. Sometimes the outside lanes are best. So we'll have to see how all that plays out. And the only way we'll know that is to watch all the races on the main track at Saratoga for this 4-day Belmont Stakes Day Festival, and see if we can see any track bias that pops up throughout those races. And now we'll talk about the Belmont Stakes Day horses, beginning with number 1, Seize the Gray. And he certainly does handle a wet track. He's run on a wet track 3 times in his career with 2 wins and a 3rd place finish. And one of those wins was at Saratoga on a wet track. That was a maiden special weight race in the slop last summer at 6 furlongs, and he went wire to wire. And then he caught a muddy track in his next race at Saratoga, the Skidmore Stakes. And he rallied from last that day to finish 3rd. That was a much slower race than his maiden race. And then he didn't catch a wet track again until the Preakness Stakes. And in that Preakness Stakes on May 18th at Pimlico, the track was listed as muddy, 1 3/16 miles, and he was able to get out there and control the pace. And he got a lot of breaks that went his way. Your morning line favorite, Muth, scratched, and he was a horse that had a lot of speed. And then you had other horses didn't go to the lead. Imagination from the outside post under Frankie Dettori. He had a nice break, but they ended up ceding the lead to Seize the Gray, and then Seize the Gray was just able to wire the field. He wasn't really threatened in that race. So if we get another speed favoring wet track and Seize the Gray from the inside post can get out there and control the pace, that would probably be his best chance. But there's other factors that could be working against him. The Belmont Stakes is his 6th start of the year and also his 3rd start in 5 weeks. So we'll have to see if he can maintain that sharp form that he showed in the Preakness. That was an upset victory that day, and let's see if he can do it again. But he certainly wouldn't mind a wet track. Now, Resilience, number 2, he's run on a wet track once in his career. That was in the Risen Star Stakes. That was on February 17th. And he stalked the pace from post 10, and then he ended up flattening out a bit late, finishing 4th, beaten 3.5 lengths. But then after that, he added blinkers and he won the Wood Memorial. And then in the Kentucky Derby, he raced wide. So for Resilience, he handled it okay, but Sierra Leone, who's also in this race and the favorite, he defeated him by 3.5 lengths on the wet track that day. And now the next one is Mystik Dan, and we know Mystik Dan handles a wet track. He actually moved forward on a wet track in the Southwest Stakes, his best career speed rating at that time. That was in the mud, that was in February. And it was at 1 mile and a 16th, and he had an outer post, but he was able to work out an inside trip, scooted up the inside, and he won that race by 8 lengths. And the last time he caught a wet track was in the Preakness Stakes. Wasn't able to catch Seize the Gray. He sat another great inside tactical trip, came after Seize the Gray, but Seize the Gray had plenty left in the stretch because he was able to get out there and dictate the pace. And Mystik Dan just did hold second over Catching Freedom. So he handles a wet track, and he's one that's going to be looking to try to stalk the pace from an inner post again. Now the Wine Steward, number 4, he's never been on a wet track. His sire is Vino Rosso, 13% wet track winners. And then the dam sire has 15% wet track winners. So he doesn't have an outstanding wet track pedigree. And other horses in this race that are some of the favorites already have wet track form. Now, number 5, Antiquarian. He was on a wet track in his maiden win. That was February 17th. That was the Risen Star undercard, and he pressed the pace and he won by a length. So he handled it fine that day. The only time he's been on a wet track. And then he was 6th in the Louisiana Derby, and then he won the Peter Pan Stakes last time out. He has good tactical speed. John Velasquez is going to ride. I wouldn't say that he moves up on a wet track, but as I said, he did handle it before, and there's no reason why he wouldn't at least handle that kind of footing. Now, Dornoch has handled a wet track on 2 occasions. He's number 6, and he's 15-1 morning line, and he's one that should be part of the pace. 2 starts on a wet track with a win and a runner-up finish. His runner-up finish was behind Seize the Gray at Saratoga, and I mentioned that race for Seize the Gray when he went wire to wire. Dornoch stalked the pace, and he was able to run second that day. That was at 6.5 furlongs at Saratoga last July. So he handles a wet track at Saratoga, just like Seize the Gray, because all wet tracks are different. These different venues, if you have a wet track at Pimlico, it doesn't mean it's going to be the same as a wet track at Saratoga. So give extra points if they've handled a wet track at the venue they're racing at. Seize the Gray did, Dornoch did as well. And then in the Remsen Stakes late last year, Dornoch was able to get out there and set the pace. It was a muddy track that day, and it was a speed favoring track. So Dornoch took advantage of that speed favoring surface, just like Seize the Gray did in the Preakness Stakes, and he was able to win by a nose over Sierra Leone, who was coming from the back of the pack, trying to overcome that speed bias. And Sierra Leone actually passed Dornoch, but Dornoch came again there. So those were his 2 wet track victories. The main problem with him is his last 2 starts. The Grade 1 Bluegrass really wasn't a threat behind Sierra Leone. And then in the Kentucky Derby, he didn't have a great start from the inside post. He ended up splitting a 20-horse field. He's going to have to show speed because in all of his good races, he was up on the pace. So look for him to be a pace factor under Luis Saez, and he wouldn't mind a wet track. Protective is a maiden for trainer Todd Pletcher, and he's never been on a wet track. Now, Medaglia d'Oro is his sire, 16% wet track sire. So he's got an okay wet track pedigree, not outstanding. And the fact that he's never won a race is a huge concern. He likes to come from off the pace, and I don't know that he's going to be good enough to win a race like this. Maybe a minor award. If it's a wet track, probably won't move him up. Honor Marie, number 8, has run on a wet track twice. He did handle it the first time that he ran on it at Churchill Downs at 7 furlongs when he rallied to finish a clear second. And the winner and the show finisher were next out winners. And then also Honor Marie was a next out winner when he won the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes at Churchill Downs. And then this year he's had some mixed results. on a wet track in the Risen Star. He wasn't really a threat. He was too far back. He ended up finishing 5th in a 12-horse field. Sierra Leone won that one. And then in his last 2 starts on a fast track, the Louisiana Derby, he did rally to finish 2nd. And in the Kentucky Derby, didn't have a great start, didn't have a great trip. He was 8th, beaten 13 lengths. So he's one that's going to have to definitely elevate his game. But he did, as I said, he did handle a wet track, honor code 17% wet track sire, but he doesn't move up on a wet track. Now, Sierra Leone, your favorite, the horse to beat on a fast track, probably the horse to beat on a wet track. His 2 wet track races were excellent. In the Remsen Stakes, as I said, Dornoch beat him by a nose, but as I also said, that was a speed favoring track. 7 horses in the 10 races that day went wire to wire. Sierra Leone was trying to overcome that speed bias, and he rallied from 12 lengths back. He was last early. He took a short lead, and then Dornoch came back, and he beat him by a nose. That was only Sierra Leone's 2nd career start, first start around 2 turns, first start on a wet track. So he had, Dornoch was much more experienced than he was at that time. He wasn't able to defeat him then. Fine effort, though. He handled the wet track fine. His first start this year, he added blinkers. The Grade 2 Risen Star Stakes at 1 mile and an 1/8 at Fairgrounds on February 17th. Wet track, he rallied from 8th in a 12-horse field, or 9th place in a 12-horse field, to win by a half length. And at that time, that was a solid effort, rallying from off the pace on that wet track. So back-to-back good wet track efforts in the Remsen and the Risen Star. And then in his last 2 starts on a fast track, the Grade 1 Bluegrass, he won that one. And then he missed by a nose in the Kentucky Derby. He was lugging in. Wise Dan set a dream inside tactical trip. He got the jump on the closers, and Sierra Leone was lugging in, and that cost him the race. So now, if it's a wet track or a fast track, Sierra Leone handles both equally as well, and he's one to fear in the stretch. And then finally, Mindframe. He's only run 2 times, and he has never been on a sloppy or muddy track, but the last track that he faced was a good track. His debut was on a fast track, and he won that one by 13 lengths at 7 furlongs. His second start at 1 mile and a 1/16 at Churchill Downs, an optional claiming race, he won that one by 7 lengths, controlling the pace on a good track. That was on May 4th. So that was a drying out track for Kentucky Derby Day that day, and he just romped. And he was the favorite in both races. Now, Constitution is sire, 17% mud sire. Street Sense, 17% for the dam side for mud sire. So Mindframe, okay, wet track pedigree. Outside post, he's probably going to try to stalk the pace while out in the clear. So those are the horses that have and their wet track form. Now, Sierra Leone, as I said, I think he is the one to beat, whether it is a fast or a wet track. He handles any kind of footing. And then horses that have done well at Saratoga on a wet track, Dornoch and Seize the Grey finished first and second, with Seize the Grey winning, Dornoch finishing second in the slop at Saratoga in a sprint race last summer. So they both handled a wet track at Saratoga. And there would be no reason why they shouldn't handle it again. And then also, Seize the Grey and Dornoch are the 2 main speed horses in the 2024 Belmont Stakes. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you like this horse racing content. And I'm going to be back tomorrow. I'm going to be handicapping the Belmont Stakes. I'm going to go through the entire field and give out my top choice, and then I'll give out a live long shot in that video as well. And that will wrap up my look at the wet track for the Belmont Stakes. And until I see you next time, good luck at the races.